This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and welcome to another of our summertime rugby conversations from the big, wide world of rugby union. We are reaching out to personalities across the game to explore what is rugby doing in their particular parts of the world. Where did it come from? How has it been developed? How is it moving? And today we have the very great privilege of speaking to the president of the Philippines Rugby Union, Ada Milby. Now, Ada is the first female member of the World Rugby Council, a member of the Asia Rugby Executive Committee. She is a former player on the Philippine national women's team, but also she was a figure skater way back in the day. So, Ada Milby, welcome to Rugby Union, and perhaps take us back to the days of figure skating in Ohio in the United States of America.
Well, thanks, David. I'm really happy to be on the podcast. And yeah, what do you want to know about figure skating? I've basically been involved in sports since basically I could walk, and it's been a massive part of my life. And I did skating for 12 years competitively, was on the Team USA Junior Development Squad, and really grateful that I had this experience in individual sport than coming to rugby, which is a team sport. Totally different experiences, and each one has something very different to offer.
So were you the one who wanted to get into figure skating, or was it your parents or a sister or a brother or a cousin who inspired you to it?
Well, my dad really firmly believed that kids should be trying all sports. So my dad or basically both my parents got us into figure skating, gymnastics, horseback riding, tennis, golf, swimming. I mean, the whole gambit of sport. And I guess at the young age of 4, I decided I really wanted to focus on skating. I just kept going, Mom, when are we going back to the rink? When are we going back to the rink? And it just sort of organically evolved from there. And I suppose just really have always had quite a competitive spirit. And my brother and I there's the two of us, so we're quite competitive with each other. So we sort of urged each other on, and both my brother and I did skating for quite a long time. He was also on Team USA.
Yeah. But it's such a grueling, hard sport, isn't it? You know, precise and very, very unforgiving. And you made it all the way through to the 1995 Junior Olympics. So clearly this was a very big part of your life. But what did it teach you about yourself and about life, perhaps, from figure skating?
Figure skating, like I said, it's an individual sport. So when you're competing, you know, I was competing against other skaters, but I was also competing against myself. And so there was a lot of, as you said, it was quite a lot of precision in the sport. And so there was a lot of perfection. You know, you're striving for perfection in every run, every program, or every time that you go out to compete. You're always looking to land every jump, complete every spin, and everything needs to be done perfectly. So I think that really instilled in me a sense of commitment to perfection and making sure that I do everything to the best of my ability. And my coach used to always have this saying, all you can do is the best that you can and let the chips fall where they may. And I think I've carried that motto through my whole life, is just doing the best that I can and then let the chips fall where they may.
Now, you also moved out of figure skating and you wanted to play, or you did play, American football, but you played on the boys' team at Tippecanoe High School. Tell me that story of wanting to play American football, and it sounds like you weren't easily dissuaded from doing what it was that you decided that you were going to do.
Well, I think coming from the figure skating background, I hadn't really had any experience about gender discrimination in sport. And so when I went on, I mean, American football is the American pastime. I won't say that to a baseball person, but yeah, it's basically the American pastime. And I had grown up playing backyard footy with the boys, just out on the pitch. And so when I stopped skating, I knew I wanted to do another sport, and I went out. I should probably mention I was homeschooled for 5 years. I mean, chasing the Olympic dream, really going for it. And then when I stopped skating and went back to school, I was trying to evaluate which sport I wanted to do next. And I went out and I looked at the volleyball players. And for context, because you can't see it in the video, I'm only 5'3", about 163 centimeters. So when I went out and I saw the volleyball players, I thought, I don't really think that one's going to be it for me, because that was the common one for the girls to play. So, and football or soccer wasn't quite popular yet in the States at that time. So I just thought, well, I love football. Why not go and play American football? And there was no girls' team. So I just thought, why not have a crack? And I went out for the tryouts, and I don't think the coaches or anyone else knew what to do with me. They couldn't say go play for the girls' team. They couldn't say. I mean, it was definitely it was a bit of a tornado in that sense. So I went out and have had some great experiences with it. I realized that I loved the contact aspect of the sport, but it was very difficult to adapt into that culture because, again, I was the first girl to do it in my school. There weren't that many girls playing American football anywhere in the country, and so the boys, let's say, were a little less than welcoming. The majority of them. There were a few of them that were like, "Yeah, come on, Ada, you got this." But overall, it was not a very welcoming environment. A couple coaches were really encouraging, but even the head coach, in the culture of team sports, everyone calls you by your last name. Milby, 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 you got this. But the head coach refused to call me by my last name. And I felt like it was maybe unintentional, but it was just those small things that made the difference in feeling acceptance within a team. And so even though I loved the contact aspect of it, I decided to move on after that season.
So it was only once, you just lasted 1 year?
I just did the one season, yeah. The boys didn't like it when I took some of their starting spots, and they didn't like that I got some of the press. And yeah, it was really, I just felt sports should be fun, and I wasn't having fun. I mean, even though I enjoyed parts of it, any team sport, especially American football and rugby, you need to feel part of the team. And when you don't feel part of the team, oftentimes people will move on.
And you discovered a love of contact. Tell me that story. Did you crease some bloke? Did you fold somebody in half?
Well, I mean, and when I was in all that gear, the helmet and all the pads, the opposing team actually could never tell that I was a girl. So it was great because when I went out to play the game, it just felt like I was playing the sport. It was actually in training that I felt that sort of discrimination. And I remember this one particular moment in training where it was the starting, one of the starting players, and it was a tackling drill, and I think he just thought, oh, I'll go easy on her because she's a girl or something, and I absolutely creamed him. and of course, the whole team would just giving him so much flack because I absolutely creamed the starting player. And so the coach said, all right, run it again. And I thought, oh no, I better just brace myself because he's about to plow straight through me. So I don't know that I'd say it to anybody that wants to play contact sport. You kind of know the first time you make a tackle or you get tackled. You know whether you love it or whether you don't love it. And I mean, we know that there's a place for everyone in rugby, but sometimes that means non-contact rugby, and that's okay too. But yeah, for me, I totally loved it. And maybe I've kind of drawn this parallel that maybe figure skating isn't so different from rugby. I mean, getting tackled on the grass is far softer than falling on the ice. So I think maybe I've just been accustomed to that contact aspect every time I fell out of a jump or I fell on the ice, and it just didn't seem to faze me.
So what was the journey to rugby? So Tippecanoe High School football, see you later. How did you find your way into the game in a place like Ohio? which is sort of not known
I
for
know.
its rugby.
Well, in the early 2000s, collegiate rugby was really quite strong. It was, as a club sport. And after I stopped American football, I tried a couple other sports. I did the 100-meter hurdles, which I was slow at because I kept jumping like figure skating style jumping. I kept jumping over the hurdles, not sailing across the hurdles. And cross country running, which was like, wretch, who wants to just run without seeing the end line? So I did a couple of other sports. Was really just trying to find my next thing. And my first year at uni, there was a group of girls that just came up to me and said, do you want to try rugby? And I said, what the heck is that? And they said, it's basically like American football, but without the pads. And I said, game on, let's try it. And of course, came to find that it was so much better than American football in so many ways. So yeah, that was.
So was that 7-a-side or?
No, I played 15. My introduction was to 15s.
15s.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of that collegiate rugby, how many games were you playing in a year, in a season, and whereabouts were you playing, and at what time of the year?
Well, now you're really asking me to go back in the archives of history. I won't say how far back that is, but it's a few years. We did play in the fall, so that would have been September through to October, November, and we were playing every week. And of course, at that stage, that we didn't have all the player welfare stuff that we have in place now. And so I think I went to 2 training sessions, and then they're like, right, you're ready to go out on the pitch, starting at center. And they just said, take the ball and crash into people. And I was really, really good at that.
And so what university was that you were representing?
That was at the Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And
so the story continues. So clearly you're still very much involved, but now you are based in the Philippines. So how did you move from one to the other? I do know that you had a career in the military. So is that what moved you? And well, I suppose before we get to that, how long did you play throughout your university career in 15?
No.
Did you then play again, or
no? So I played that fall season and then the spring, and then I joined the military. So basically, I think the social aspect of the rugby culture maybe got to me a bit, and I knew I needed to sort myself out. So I joined the military, which it did sort me out.
You were creaming people and you were creaming beers, were you?
Well, and you have to remember, because I came from this high-performance figure skating background, I didn't do the things that kids did in high school. I didn't have this early introduction to drinking and partying and all that. I mean, I was chasing the Olympic dream. So all of a sudden, I was introduced to the rugby culture. And I went a little bit off the rails. So
chasing perfection. Were you the captain of the boat race team? Were you in the sculling after
yeah,
the games?
a few of the off-field activities. So once I joined the military, actually, I stopped playing rugby for a bit because I was serving in all parts of the country. I did a tour overseas, and I didn't reconnect with rugby again until I moved to the Philippines in 2012. And other than my brother, who had already been living here for a few years, I didn't actually know anybody else. And what's the best way to meet people is join a rugby team. So I was really fortunate that Philippines Rugby had just started their women's program the year prior to me moving out here. And of course, I just basically picked up the ball as if I had never put it down. A couple months after joining the team, I was captain for the 15s. A couple months later, captain for the 7s. So it was really a massively rapid return to rugby in that sense after almost a 10-year hiatus.
So tell me that story of rugby in the Philippines in 2012. How many people were playing? How many competitions? And when you were playing nationally, who were you playing against?
Well, very few. I mean, like I said, we had literally just started the rugby here just before I moved out. So there was a club in another island called Cebu, and then we had the girls that were based in Manila. We all trained together. We basically would pitch up on a Sunday, and we did pitch and play. We said, all right, let's just distribute the teams evenly, and have a crack at each other. And we played games like that week in, week out in preparation for the internationals. So that year we played against Singapore, India, Laos. Yeah, it was the Asia Rugby Division 1 Championship. So we played against those 3 teams. And then, yeah, we're pretty much in that bracket of teams. Next year we'll be returning to test rugby after COVID, and we'll be playing against Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. So really looking forward to that.
So how did you go in those early days? What was the standard like, given that you had so few players available to you?
It was it was pretty loose and fast. I'd say we had a pretty basic structure of play. A lot of the players, we had some players who were really keen on the contact, other players who were jersey grabbing, and I definitely say we were probably floundering a little bit, but we were on par with the development in the region. So I can't remember that year. I think we got second that year. Can't remember the final score, but I do remember we got second. Mostly, I don't remember so many of the score lines as much as the stories behind it, like dislocating my shoulder in the game on the Wednesday and then having to play again on the Saturday, running to score a try and somebody pulling my pants down, things like that. I remember more of those stories more than the scoreline, because I think rugby is more than a scoreline. Rugby is really the stories behind the games, the stories of what happens during the games, and those memories are a bit stronger for me than the scorelines.
Yeah, it's a great pioneer story, but one shared by many of the women's rugby community around the world who have worked so hard over many, many years to be established, often not taken seriously even in the major unions. And as I say, the pioneers of the sport just kept at it, kept working hard. And it's not that long ago. There are lots of stories in lots of countries about the discrimination and other things with women's rugby. And for those who have been a part of it and have contributed to it, the Women's Rugby World Cup this year must have been such a moment for all of you to see the game played as it was, in front of crowds and in a spirit that was unique and rare. It was such a great tournament.
Yeah, I think it was a watershed moment, really. I was at the Rugby World Cup in 2017 in Ireland, and I think the final was played in front of a crowd of about maybe 10 or 11,000 people, at a university stadium. So to go from that to 2025, where there's more than 80,000 people in a stadium, I don't get teary-eyed very often. I mean, even when we lost a game, a big game, whether it was 7s or 15s, I never cried ever. But that was it was just such an inspirational moment being at the Allianz Twickenham Stadium and just seeing everyone being so excited for a women's rugby final. And it was so packed. I don't know. I had this moment. I was like, I'm so happy for this moment. So it was really, I think it was a demonstration that women's rugby is not just a growth opportunity, but actually it can be a growth driver.
Oh, absolutely, because I think the 80,000 people, they weren't there just out of any sense of duty. They were there because they were going to watch two very skillful, well-prepared football teams play a very high quality and high standard of rugby. And I think that was one of the great features of the Women's Rugby World Cup, is that we saw the game played by women at an impeccable standard, I thought.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
And loved the whole thing and the whole occasion and everything that went with it. And I do hope that it is that point, although I do fear in some ways, and I know we've got the World XV coming next year in 2026, which is very important to continue to keep the women front and centre and to have proper competitions that raise the profile. I just hope that we avoid the trap of falling back, which I did think happened, just after the New Zealand Rugby World Cup, when there was great excitement after that final when New Zealand beat England, but then the game sort of went into a bit of a lull before sort of picking itself back up for this Rugby World Cup. But anyway, that's another story for another time, and I'm sure as a vigilant member of the World Rugby Council, you'll be doing everything you possibly can to ensure that the investment and the focus continues. So before we sort of jump into World Rugby, we'll get to them as we go through the conversation. But I'm sort of a bit interested then more around the Philippines rugby now. So clearly, as you say, you're coming back to play, Singapore, India this year, back to Test rugby, which is great for the Philippines. But so where are you? That's for the women, I imagine, but whereabouts for the men? How many players? How's it all coming along? Just how is the game? How healthy is the game of rugby union in the Philippines?
I think that's a really interesting question because, we're coming off the back of lots of reports about how the big unions are struggling financially, and attrition is, in the men's game especially, the men and the boys game is quite high. So I would say that for small unions, that's even further compounded. We didn't have any COVID bailout plans. We just had to keep stripping it back. And the Philippines COVID period was, I think, other than Hong Kong, China, was maybe the longest in the world. We actually didn't have rugby on the field for 2 full years. So we couldn't do anything for 2 full years. So we basically had to restart the whole thing all over again. People moved on, started having families, jobs, all these other things. So I would say that we finally stabilized this year, and next year we'll be looking to restart some of our international tours for our youth players. But we've got about 2,000 players across non-contact and contact rugby playing in our domestic leagues. And then our international, our test level players, like I said, our men's just played their first test match for the first time in 5 years, and the women will be first time in 6 years next year. And they did really well. They played in a sub-regional Southeast Asia, it's called the Unions Cup, and they won. So we're very, very happy to see the strong return of Philippines rugby test match stuff, really coming out strong. And then for the women, it's been a bit more challenging, I think, to get the women's game back on track. But we're also working through that, and we're really hopeful that the girls will put out a pretty strong performance in February as well. I think that what COVID did do for us was it allowed us to take stock about strategy and sustainability, and I suspect a lot of unions were doing the same thing, or I hope they were doing the same thing. But it was really about how can we make sure that we're being the most efficient with our investment. And unfortunately, it's also meant that we've had to make some hard decisions about, is our strategic focus on sevens? Is it on 15s? We all have limited resources that we're working with. And so we do have more sevens opportunities presently than we do 15s, but we know that 15s is still the DNA of the game, and we want to make sure that we're still showing that rugby is the game for all. We know that sevens isn't really, you can't take the plumpies and the things that we all talk about that our rugby for all is about. So, but sevens is also really fit for the Philippines body type. We have a lot of basketballers, we've got a lot of volleyballers, we've got a lot of sprinters. So it does make sense for us strategically to be focusing more on the sevens. And we've also come quite close a couple of times. We've been to a sevens Rugby World Cup when it was in Russia 2013, and for the men. And we've narrowly missed out on the Olympics a couple of times. So we know that we've got a shot there. We know that for 15s, it's probably 50 years to never for us to make a men's or a women's Rugby World Cup. So we just know that we've got to put the focus on where we think we can see the most growth and opportunity for high performance.
So 2,000 at the moment, what plan or what objective have you set yourself for, say, 5 years' time? Are you hoping to double that in 5 years' time, or 50% increase? What sort of thing are you looking at?
So at the moment, we're trying to make sure that everything that we do is really built with intention. So we are looking at alternative forms of growth, which is involving sport for development outcomes. So in the Philippines, sport is really not, it's very amateur across all codes. So we know that we're going to, for a lot of people, unless they're going to make the national squad, we lose them pretty early on in their early 20s. So we are really just looking to make sure that we are highlighting that rugby can be an opportunity for social change, for social impact, developing life skills. So there's an education component that's very appealing to Filipino parents, that rugby is not just for rugby, they're actually gaining all these other aspects of life skill development. And we're using that as our avenue to basically build more clubs. So build the rugby around the community, then the community creates the club from that. So we haven't set any hard targets in terms of how many clubs or how many players, but through that process, I mean, probably 90% of our community rugby is through a sport for development approach.
Yeah, right. How is that narrative translating? How is it landing?
Fantastic, especially because rugby in the Philippines is more popularly known as a drug than it is the sport. So I've said this on other interviews, but rugby is there's a solvent, it's like a glue, and the name of the glue is rugby. And so we're getting ready to go into the Southeast Asia Games in a couple of weeks, and inevitably there's always these memes that go around this time of the year, where there's a picture of kids under a bridge holding these bottles of glue, and they say, "Oh, the rugby team's getting ready for the Southeast Asia Games again." So we think that having the sport for development approach not only helps us to address that narrative, but then addresses a bigger narrative around education and life skill development.
Has that helped with government funding, that sport for development
It has.
narrative?
We've actually been able to access funding that we would not normally be able to access through a sport-only angle, and partnering with other organizations that help us to access that money. I think we've we've got around 200,000 or so in development over the last few years, and that money would not have been available to us through traditional sponsorships or normal private sector funding.
Yeah. Now, you say sport in the Philippines is largely amateur.
All
Where
amateur.
would
All
rugby
amateur.
sit? All amateur. So are there, where does it sit then? I imagine that football and baseball would likely be the largest two sports, but then where might rugby sit in the pecking order?
I haven't seen a ranking of where rugby sits, but I would say the top one is most likely basketball. I mean, every community has, whether it has a net on it or not, they'll have a hoop, and it's because of space constraints. It's the easiest, least barriers to entry sport to enter. So basketball, then I would say football probably, and volleyball. All three of those sports all have commercialized professional leagues. So I would say that that's pretty useful for them. And then boxing, martial arts, and then athletics, and then, probably we're after that.
Yeah, okay. So you are involved and a member of the Asia Rugby Executive Committee. Tell us that story about what that looks like, what its composition is, what its priorities are for the next period.
Well, I suppose I got onto the Asia Rugby Executive Board in the same sense that I got so heavily involved in Philippines rugby, and it was just out of this sense of wanting to contribute. I think coming from the high performance background in the US, and then coming to the Philippines and seeing how under-resourced high performance is across a lot of the codes, but definitely in rugby, that I just wanted to do more. So I got onto the board for Philippines Rugby, and then there weren't that many women at that time who were putting their hands up to run for the Asia Rugby Board. And in fact, I hadn't even considered it. It wasn't part of my plan, so to speak. Someone said, "Hey, the one woman that we know that's coming off the board, she doesn't want to continue," and someone said, "You might be good. Do you want to do it?" So that was kind of my entry point, and then I realized that a lot of the issues that we were facing in Philippines were some of the same challenges that Asia was facing. So I think it was just born out of this desire to want to help and develop and do more for the game. And the Exco is comprised of 13 elected individuals plus 2 independents, and our priorities at the moment, well, we're actually undergoing our strategic review right now. So we'll be coming out with a new plan in 2026. But a lot of that will be aligned around World Rugby's strategic plan for 2026 to 2031. So really looking at how we can create more funding opportunities to support our unions. How can we help them to create more sustainability, especially around governance and finance? Again, we know that the big unions out there are struggling, and so we're really wanting to make sure that we can support those unions to become viable without having to rely so much on, grants from World Rugby or through those traditional markets.
And it's an interesting composition, isn't it? The Asian rugby, when you consider you have a country like Japan, who are clearly now participating at the highest level and will participate in the Nations Cup next year, all the way through to the Philippines. And it also extends from Southeast Asia right across to the Middle East.
Yeah,
so
we've got Guam on one side and Lebanon on the other side. So it's actually over 11,000 kilometers to get from the east to the west.
So how does that impact the work that you do and how allocation of resources
massively
and priority and massively?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we've got sort of Japan and don't forget Hong Kong's also qualified for 2027.
Yes.
We've got those two
indeed.
countries that are going to be representing at the our pinnacle events. And then we've got, our associate members who we've got unions out there who struggle to even have rugby being played in their country because it might be a war-torn zone. And so actually a lot of their players are based, in a neighboring country because that's where they're at. So the prioritization, I mean, we'll be undergoing that in our strategic review, but it is massive across the region. And admittedly, it is a struggle to figure out how there's no one solution that fits all, and trying to figure out how we can meet the union where they are and support their development where they're at to help them improve is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have in Asia Rugby.
So, and again, it's very much aligned that, as you say, the strategic plan, the long-awaited strategic plan from World Rugby, which has been promised through the year, but we're ultimately going to see it in January. You're on the World Rugby Council, so you're one of the lucky few who's been able to see it. I've been trying to get a look at it for a number of months now, but anyway, I'm patiently waiting with everybody else. So in terms then of those priorities around financial sustainability, around funding, around governance, what are the top 2 or 3 things collectively that might apply across the board in Asia that need to be addressed? So clearly commercialisation opportunities would sit very clearly as a high priority to be able to get more funding. World Rugby has limits on the call on what it can invest in the game, and it has obviously priorities in other places such as the Americas. So from Asian Rugby's point of view, what's your hope, around those 2 or 3 things that you might be able to move the needle in such a way that there is a demonstrative impact on the game in Asia?
Yeah, I think having looked at the World Rugby strategic plan, and don't worry, it will be coming up very, very soon, David. Just a few more weeks to wait.
I hope it's more than a brochure, because Eddie Jones is going to give me the rounds of the kitchen.
I'm sure Eddie will have a lot to say about the new strategic plan. So you'll probably have to do a whole other podcast to have him back on just for his thoughts on the new strategic plan. In fact, I think a lot of people will have lots of different comments. It'd be really interesting to see how it's received by everyone publicly. But for us in Asia, we think that, and actually I'd say this is maybe a view from a number of regions, is really understanding what is the role of the region in the structure of World Rugby. How are we best supporting World Rugby's goals? Are we a bit more independent? Are we an arm of World Rugby? We know that we're a member of World Rugby. So it's getting a bit of clarity on that, and that process is actually undergoing in Q1 of next year. So really excited to get a bit more clarity, to just see, are the regions really fit for purpose in its current setup? Is there a way that we can make it more clear about what the roles and responsibilities are for a region to be able to deliver competitions, develop the game, and make sure that we're supporting all the unions of not just World Rugby, but of the regional association. So I'd say that that's a big one for us is looking at that governance structure. And then, as you know, well, maybe you don't know, Asia Rugby, I think, us in Africa, I think we're the only two regions, to my knowledge, that don't have a commercial product for rugby. So we've got our regional pathways for Rugby World Cups and Olympics and things like that, but we don't actually have a commercial product. And as we all know, things like Six Nations or Rugby Championships, those really do support those big unions who then use that funding to also support some of the smaller unions. So I think that's a pretty big priority for us in Asia, is how can we find a commercial avenue for us? And yeah, I'd say that those are probably the...
Is that realistic?
Is it realistic?
Is that realistic, do you think?
I think back when Twiggy Forrest was looking at the rugby, there was some discussions with some of the Asian unions. So we definitely need a strong proposal. I think there's interest. We've got big rugby playing countries. I mean, New Zealand took their under 85s to play in Sri Lanka earlier. I think it was earlier this year, and it was, I mean, sold out stadium, massive. So we can't underestimate the impact of commercialization. Rugby did a Rugby Premier League earlier this year as well, where they brought in some sort of pinnacle players from big teams, mixed in with some local Indian players, some bridge players from smaller countries, and or from some of the up and rising countries like USA, Canada, I think, and I can't remember some of the others. But that was also. It's trying to think outside the box. How can we do something a little bit different? Deliver a product that is going to be made for the Asian audience, and maybe it's 15s, maybe it's 7s. Who knows? I mean, we really need to be thinking again. What is going to be the most opportune thing for us to build within Asia for an Asian audience?
We're not talking rugby. We're building it. Rugby Unity.
Would there be the appetite from television audiences across Asia to watch a competitive commercial, certainly won't be professional, but maybe semi-professional competition of sorts? Would the broadcasters be interested, and would there be commercial partners interested?
I think that depends on how it's structured. So in 2019, for example, we/World Rugby were not able to secure a continental broadcast partner. So each broadcast was, based per country. We couldn't get a singular broadcast partner for the Rugby World Cup. So that kind of tells you, again, the vastness of the region to get alignment behind one broadcaster. But if we kind of break it into smaller chunks, like South Asia, East Asia, Central Asia, West Asia, Southeast Asia, you split it into that sort of chunk, and people, it's like Six Nations. People care more about a Philippines versus Malaysia test than they do about Philippines versus India, because it's just a little bit outside of the interest of the viewership. So I think if we break it into those smaller chunks, that ends up being a little bit more palatable for somebody who's interested in a commercial product and or for broadcast.
Are you optimistic?
I am optimistic. I think that there are a few initiatives. I mean, here in Southeast Asia, there's a group of us within the region that, the Unions Cup is an initiative that was born out of that desire to just want to play more rugby. How can we make a commercial product? And that receives zero funding from World Rugby, zero funding from Asia Rugby. It's just something that we've just decided to do as a collective Southeast Asia. And I think it's only in the second year, it's completed 2 years, going into the third year. So I think once we've got a little bit of momentum built behind it, then that's something that we can really start to take to potential funders.
It's a question that I've put to the president of Indian Rugby and the president of Chile Rugby, and I'll put it to you. What is it that the rest of the world could do, perhaps, to support Asian rugby and to support Philippines rugby? And by who, I'm not talking about national unions and the World Rugby and the whole, governance and structure of the game, which will, present whatever opportunities and support that it may. But I suppose I'm more asking from, the fans, the supporters, the people who love the game. Rugby Unity has a very simple mission, which is all about how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And so in answering that question for the Philippines and for Asia, what can fans do to support the future prosperity of rugby union in that part of the world?
That's a fantastic question. What did Rahul say?
Well, Rahul's got a commercial product.
Yeah, he does.
And so
he
Rahul
does.
said, watch it. He said, if you can watch the game,
Watch it,
if
watch
you can
it.
be interested
Yeah.
in that window that they've got, that very small window. And again, with Rugby Unity, we're going to do everything we possibly can to bring as much possible attention to it at that time. Because he's got a product that you can have a look at. So that's what Rahul is looking for. But he's also looking for further investment. Yeah. He has a very clear objective of the Indian seven-a-side team participating at the Brisbane Olympics in 2032. So he has that nailed to the wall, and the decision-making that is taking place in India is directed towards that specific objectives. And so funding is required to get more opportunities so as that there can be more players who are given more exposure to high performance and preparation and all those other things. So they would probably be the two things I can remember that Rahul was quite specific.
Yeah, that sounds like what Rahul would say, actually. Really, I respect him so much as someone who's really done a lot for rugby in India. And I'd say it's similar for us, although we don't have a commercial product in the Philippines. I think that it's probably a bit two-part. I recognize that we are in the age of storytelling and that fans want to engage in stories more than static posts. And so that's something that we're working on internally within Philippines Rugby to make sure that we're doing a better job of telling the story of rugby, telling the story of our players, so that the fans have something to engage with. But from a fan base, gosh, we would just love, to see as many people out supporting, engaging with our posts, engaging with our content. And of course, if you used to play the game or you're just an avid fan that you want to support, there's lots of ways to do small donations and to say, hey, we've actually just revamped our entire sponsorship approach, so it allows people to sponsor a jersey, to sponsor a player, and so it gives us a little bit more flexibility. We didn't even realize that we could do this, that you could actually have you could have a different logo on jersey number 1 and a different logo on jersey number 2. Of course, the team uniform has to be the same, but you could do that. And that, again, we're trying to think outside of the box. How can we make sponsorship a little bit easier for people to access? So instead of saying, hey, we need a big sponsor to come in at $100,000, hey, you could get your logo on that player's short for $500, and it's only for that tournament. But that little things like that go a long way when you start to accumulate that across the number of tournaments and supporting players throughout the year for their training.
And how might people be educated about that, or how could they access information about that particular opportunity? Where would it be? Is it the best to go to philippinesrugby.com, or where is the get in contact with you over LinkedIn or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, happy for people to reach out to me personally on LinkedIn. They can also reach out to our administration team, admin@philippines.rugby. You can also go to our website, philippines.rugby, and there's a contact us button there. So there are a number of ways for people to get in touch with us. And again, we've got a number of tournaments coming up in the first quarter of the year, and I know all of our players. We would love for our players to be able to focus on playing and not be worried about whether or not we've got the funds to send them. So, yeah, anybody who's interested in supporting Philippines Rugby, we would love to hear from you.
So, are there one or two stories that you can tell of some of your players who have done extraordinary things, either to participate in the sport or to have overcome setbacks, or any other particularly engaging anecdotes that you tell that sum up the story of Philippines rugby through the stories of the players?
Well, two come to mind. One is a player, his name is Lito Ramirez. He is actually the epitome of the rugby journey that we're hoping to create, where rugby is known for the sport and not for the drug. So Lito actually used to sniff rugby the glue when he was a kid. And we call them orphanages, but they're not, he has parents, they're not orphanages. It's basically a home that you can go to where you can get food and education when your parents can't take care of you. And so he was there, and when he was in this institution, he was then exposed and introduced to the sport of rugby. And he went from sniffing rugby to playing rugby to then representing on the national team. And so I think that is sort of like the iconic thing that I would love to see, that I could go anyone down on the street and say, hey, do you want to do rugby? And they know that I'm talking about the sport and not the drug. That to me is the ultimate success story. And then the other one is Sylvia Tudoc. So she was one of our players that came to us from touch rugby. She came from a university. There's the only university in the Philippines that has scholarships for rugby. Now, it is touch rugby, but I mean, still, it's the only university in the country that offers scholarships for any kind of footy. And she's overcome quite a lot, and she's represented 15s, 7s, and then she had a child. And I think in the Philippines, there's still quite a bit of stigma around women returning to sport after having children. And so it's really great to see her, make her come back to the field, and she's represented us again this year, and she's up for selection for the Southeast Asia Games in a couple of weeks. So I think those kinds of stories are really important, because it's busting stereotypes, it's challenging what's possible. And Lito definitely challenged what's possible, because you can imagine a kid who was, on drugs growing up. You can't imagine that he would have the nutrition or any of the things that are necessary to be playing rugby. So for him to go from that to being on the national team has been really, really inspirational. And then, of course, for Sylvia, busting down those stereotypes that, you can be a mom and you can play rugby. And I think those are really important messages, really important stories to be sharing.
Yeah, no, lovely stories. So, all right, so the sort of last part of your journey is, the elevator keeps going for Ada Milby and the World Rugby Council. You've had some softballs up until now. I'm now going to hold you accountable for the governance of the World Rugby Council. But anyway, before we get to that, how did that happen? How did you make your way from Asian rugby to World Rugby Council?
Well, I would say that there's a little bit of timing, and I mean, they say luck is sort of preparation and opportunity coming together at the right time, and I think that's probably what happened there as well. So when World Rugby made its major governance change to get towards this 30% on World Rugby Council, they were able to do it in a flash. And Asia Rugby was just the first one to say, yeah, we've already got someone lined up, let's do it. And so I was the first appointed. But it was just really timing issue. And I think it's really great to see so many amazing people, women and men, on the council. And I think when I first came onto the council my first meeting was in 2018, and I feel like there were not that many women willing to speak up at that time. But fast forward to the last meeting that we had in September, and many of the voices that were asking questions and making statements and comments were coming from the women in the room. So it's a huge shift in what's possible when you make space for diversity and inclusion, that maybe it starts off a little bit shaky, but once people really start gaining momentum in the space and feeling more comfortable in the space, really brings out the best.
So that journey from 2018 to 2025, obviously, as you say, that diversity, that equity, that inclusion has, created a richer conversation, perhaps more perspective, better decision making, likely, and it's. The governance reforms have given the opportunities to get that 30%, and that's all in place. But I suppose my biggest challenge with the World Rugby Council at the moment is its involvement in the way that the game is actually played around the decision-making and I suppose the approvals processes as we go through. And we agree, the council signs off on red card trials and other matters that go to the heart of the actual game itself. And I don't actually think that that's the place for the World Rugby Council. I think that should be left to a smaller, more agile, more decisive committee who the council have deputised to actually make decisions. But it's the experts about the way the game is played, because at the moment, we're seeing around, the cards, the yellow cards and the red cards and the way the game's being administered, that we're having regularly, games 15 against 14, 15 against 13. The disadvantage, it needs to happen much faster. There needs to be intervention to retain the integrity of the sport, whereas the way it works at the moment is, we've got the shape of the game coming in February, and we'll have a conversation about it in February. It's like, that's not how the world works now. People want things to move a lot faster. And I just believe that the integrity of the contest through, for example, the November games, that we need a better decision-making construct to be able to interfere with the game to make it as appealing as possible. Because unless we can make it as appealing as possible, we're going to fail in attracting more people in more countries to be able to grow to know and love the game. And again, on the council, you have representative from amateur all the way up to the elite. So again, I just wonder whether or not that is the right place to be making decisions about the way the game is played at the highest levels. So anyway, that's my thing. How do you respond to that? That, have we got it right or have we got it wrong in terms of the way the game is played at the elite level?
Well, I think that World Rugby has recognized and acknowledged that the decision-making process has been slow in the past. It's something that they are collectively trying to address. There's more check-in points now when it comes to global law trials. They've also introduced, sort of these law labs where they can do mini trials before things go to council. So I wasn't expecting the council question, but when things get to the council, it's already been through a number of all the technical specialists. So it's been through either a law lab or it's been through a union or two unions that were willing to trial a thing. I mean, how many years did the 20-minute red card? It was trialed for many, many years already, right, in the Southern Hemisphere. So that kind of stuff, it eventually gets to the Regulations Committee, and the Regulations Committee is also taking into account the feedback from the technical experts and the consultation from the unions where those things have been trialed. And then it goes to the council based on all of that evidence to say whether something should be proposed for a global law trial or not, or whether it's left to, as you saw with community rugby, the lowering of the tackle height was left up to each individual union until recently, where now it'll be implemented globally as well. But all of those things, I think because World Rugby is trying to do as much as it can to be making evidence-based decisions, unfortunately, it just takes a long time to get that evidence together. I think right now we're looking at the tackle height even for the high performance game, right? For the professional game, to see if we should be matching it, because should we have the lower tackle height at the community game when all the big kids are playing by different rules? And I think that it's an ongoing conversation that the professional game is inherently different from the community game. And so all those kinds of nuances are being hashed out in meetings and all these small conversations before it even gets to the council. But
But surely they have to be separated. Decisions that are being made about the community game have got nothing to do with what's happening in the professional game. And if we don't get the professional game right, we're not going to get the money.
Yeah.
Because my issue about all of this is, and that governance that you just outlined sounds to me perfectly fit for purpose for about 1846. It's got to move faster. These labs are like the perfection. This is this obsession with, we've got to have a trial and we've got to get it tested and we've got to get it right. It's like, no, other professional sports don't do that. They just make decisions, and if it's going the wrong way, they change it back or they alter it. Yeah. And they move a lot faster, because I just think if there's not a separation and we have a repeat of what happened through November, we are going to slowly but surely, with this obsession with safety, and that's another issue that I've got. Now, I want the game to be as safe as possible, but the moment that you walk across the whitewash to go onto the field, there is risk in playing rugby, and you are never going to starch out all of the risk and the danger that goes with playing a game of rugby. It's impossible. And so you have to accept that at some level there is going to be a risk, and there are going to be accidents that happen on the field. And, incidental head clashes that end up with a yellow card or a 20-minute red card. All of a sudden you've destroyed the contest, and 80,000 people who've paid to watch the game are no longer getting a contest, and the millions of people who are sitting at home are no longer getting a contest, and it's not of interest. Like, I think this will ladder up into a absolute crisis unless the council can come to this position of saying, we have got to outsource this to a group of experts who are going to be given the power to make decisions quickly, because law labs and discussions and perfection and evidence base and all the rest of it, I tell you, we'll have this perfectly neat, lovely game that we'll all be sitting around and watching, and the lights will have been turned off and everyone will have left. I think it is an absolute major, major risk if the World Rugby Council does not act and act quickly.
I actually agree with you that we need to figure out how to be more agile in our decision making, and I hope that I'll make sure I forward the podcast on to some of my colleagues on the council so they can hear these views.
Well, please,
and
please do, because the only reason we've started this podcast is because we love the game as much as anybody. I've had this lovely, wonderful, privileged career where, I've been involved from a community level all the way through to, being involved in World Cup winning teams and everything in between. But if we don't make change, and we don't make change quickly, and we don't become more agile and more dedicated to putting the fan at the centre of every decision that we're making, because you look at the giants and I know the governance is different around the NFL and the NBA and in Australia with the AFL and the NRL. Okay, it's much, much easier that they can just meet on a Monday night, make a change, and it's on the field by the Saturday. But we've got to do a lot better than, like last time, I don't have much hair, but whatever hair I had, I lost when I realised that we were going to it. We had this big thing about the red card, and we're announcing we're going to a trial, as it's some sort of victory that we've now sort of moved to the next thing. Anyway, I just, and Eddie Jones and Ewan Mackenzie and I on the Rugby Unity podcast, if you've listened or others do listen, we do talk about it a lot, because I think, we're concerned that unless we can work out ways to retain the integrity of 15 on 15 on the field, we're going to struggle. We're going to really struggle to because, as you know, there is no better sport on this planet when rugby is played at its best between two competitive teams of 15
Absolutely.
People on 15 once they're on the field.
Yeah, I think
there is absolutely, you can't beat rugby, and I think we all know that, which is why I think we're all sort of animated by trying to find a solution. And you'll be pleased to know, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that Brett Robinson will be coming on the program before the end of the year.
Awesome.
And he's really going to cop it.
I'll let you
say
really hard questions for him. But all I can say is that from my involvement on the council from 2018 until now, that there has been a massive shift and recognition about the role of the fan in making and how we're making decisions around the game. So even at the Shape of the Game meeting this year, every single agenda item was the whole thing was look at it through the lens of the fan. Look at it through the lens of the fan. And so I think that is, we're still working through what that looks like, because we've got different categories of fans, right? We've got the avid fans like yourself, myself, Eddie, folks that are like, we know what the game is, this is what it looks like, but even the game that we know it isn't the same as it was when, William Webb Ellis first picked up the rugby ball, right? So the game does evolve over time. And I think we're at a bit of a crossroads between what the avid fan who's been watching rugby for the last 30 years are expecting, and the sort of outlier fan or the casual fan that we're trying to bring into the game to either watch or play or otherwise. And so the needs of those two audiences are probably quite different. And I think that's the thing that's being worked through. But I will let you save the real answer from Brett Robinson on that one. But that's just my personal view, is that we've got an older audience that love bums in seats, that want to watch the spectacle of the game live. And we've got, the younger audience, like my kids, who can barely watch more than 7 minutes of rugby, and then they're on to the next, they're scrolling to something else on their feed. So what are we doing to adapt, to make sure that the game is something that is appealing to the over 30s and something that's appealing to the over 15s? So they're just different needs.
Sure, but I would say that for everybody, whether you're casual or you're rusted on, if we start with the principle of keeping 15 people against 15 people at the elite level on the field, and we also accept that there is risk in the game and that not every time there is head contact, because it's anyway. I could go on, but I won't.
Maybe when
I'll let you
come
off.
across the pond, we'll have a pint, and then you can share more.
Make sure. Okay. We could have a few more than actually, I don't think I'd like to have a pint with you. It sounds like when you were back at university in
those were university days.
That you're a handful. Captain of the boat race. I've got you, Ada Milby. I know exactly who you are. I've met you before. So listen, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your insights and your wisdom and your commitment to the sport, because, again, the game only survives through the efforts of people like yourself who are dedicating a significant part of your your expertise, your knowledge, your skills, your behaviour, your attitude, which goes to enriching this wonderful game that we all are a part of. And so thank you for your service to the game, and long may that continue. Are you sort of hoping that you will continue on your, with this commitment? Because with your time with the Philippines Rugby, with Asian Rugby, and with World Cup Rugby, that doesn't sound like it leaves a whole lot of time for too much else.
Yeah, actually, a lot of people locally like to call me Wonder Woman. I don't know if it's Wonder Woman or insanity. Some days it feels like Wonder Woman, other days it feels a bit like insanity. I think when you're truly passionate about rugby, it doesn't, yes, there are definitely days when I feel like, what am I doing? Just throw the cards in the air and just walk away. But I realize that that's just the feeling in the moment, and I just get up the next day and I go again, because I love rugby, I love this sport, and I just think it's the greatest sport, and everyone should be part of it. Everyone should be either a fan or a referee or part of the community or somehow involved in this sport that we love. And I think that that's what drives me. And I think people often ask me, like, oh, do you have aspirations to be, the next level? And I actually have never had aspirations. My rise in rugby has never been attributed to a plan. It's always just been out of a willingness to say, yeah, I think I can help. What can I do? And that's always what it's been. So as long as I'm useful and I can contribute and I'm relevant, then I'd love to stay involved. At the time when somebody taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, it's time to pass the jersey on, we don't think you've got something to contribute anymore, I'm happy to do that, because we're all here for a time, do the best that we can while we've got the jersey, and then we pass it on to the next person to do their best. And that's all we can hope for.
Indeed. Well, congratulations again on your contribution to the game, and long may it continue. So, Ada Milby, good luck with the Southeast Asian Games that are coming up and all of the other conversations and discussions and other contributions that you'll be making to Rugby Union in the days, the weeks and the months ahead. So thank you very much for joining us on Rugby Unity today.
Thanks for having me, David.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. What a wonderful servant of our great game. And really, we need more Ada Milbys in the world, don't we? Just putting in and really contributing at all levels of the game. Because again, Rugby Unity, as I say, often, this very simple mission is about how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And I think Ada belled the cat there when it's really, that could be joining your local club. That could be cooking a sausage. That could be running the line. That could be washing the jerseys, all the way up to sitting on World Rugby Council and everywhere in between. And you can see that Ada Milby is probably doing all of those things at the moment. So think about your contribution. Think about what you're doing. Think about what part of this game can you be involved in, because there is one great thing about rugby. It is the most inclusive sport in the world. There is a place on the field for all shapes and sizes, but there is a place for everybody in a rugby club. So think about it. Don't sit at home. Get involved. Go back to the game probably when you're a kid and you loved it. Maybe take some action in 2026 and be part of what will be a wonderful year of 2026 as we all head to the 2027 Rugby World Cup, and indeed all of the competitions that will be taking place across Asia, across the Americas, all throughout Europe. There'll be so much rugby played over 2026. There'll be a lot for where people can get involved. But very grateful for Ada Milby for sharing some time with us today, and very grateful for you for coming back once again to listen to one of these sort of lay-back summer session interviews with the big personalities from around the world of rugby union. And thanks for following, liking, subscribing and being involved in the Rugby Unity community. It's fantastic. And if you do have questions, comments, anything else, please send them to us, be it on YouTube, TikTok, Apple, Spotify, all the social media channels. There's lots of activity there, and there's often lots of questions and comments. So please act as the third voice and make your contribution to this conversation as we look to help to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. But for me, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this week. Please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.